PSA Micro Dagger or Glock 43X MOS. Which one should you guys choose? We're gonna be going over the price, ergonomics, holster options, aftermarket support, and the reliability of both these handguns. If you guys learned something in this video, we'd appreciate a like and subscribe. But jumping right in, let's talk about price. Glock 43X MOS comes in at $485, bare bones, without all of the attachments on here. I actually think that's a great price, both for Glock and for the competition. It's gonna be a little bit more than some of the other subcompact options, but definitely not the most expensive. As for the Micro Dagger, you're coming at $349, so substantially cheaper than the 43X. It's not gonna come with any of the stuff as you see on here, but I still think that's a pretty good price considering the gun that you are getting. It's essentially a Gen 5 43X, but $130 cheaper. But for me, the $136 in savings are gonna go into some aftermarket upgrades for this handgun. We'll talk more about that later when we talk about aftermarket support and parts. With these both being based off the Glock 43X platform, it's surprising how different they actually feel. The ergonomics are gonna be noticeably different. The 43X feels really good to me. The stippling is not super aggressive. They definitely could have put more on here. But when I point the handgun and present it, you feel the boxiness a little bit from the 43X. Each edge is kind of sharp. I have a hot spot here on the back of the beaver tail, whereas I think the Micro Dagger does a better job with ergonomics. It just forms to my hand better. There's the typical Dagger hump in the back, which feels really good in the hand. There's no hot spots on the beaver tail. The undercut feels appropriate. The length of pull is the exact same as the Glock 43X. I wish it was a little bit longer like the 365. No fault to the Dagger, it's the same as the 43, so it's not terrible. With the Micro Dagger, they put this texturing on here. It's not super aggressive, which is probably good for concealed carry. For me, I wish it was a little more aggressive. Like 1,000 grit sandpaper is kind of what it reminds me of. I wish it was a little more coarse. What is kind of nice is they put this texturing right where your thumb goes for your support hand, so it makes it kind of lock in a little bit better. One thing we did notice when shooting this is the Micro Dagger had a little bit more felt recoil than the Glock 43X. We used the HG43 compensator on here and the HG43 no fin. It's the exact same compensator, except this one has fins to fit the Gen 5 profile. So we're not exactly sure why this had a little more recoil. It could be the grip texture, it could be the ergonomics. I also noticed when you pull the trigger, my finger kind of wants to roll in here and I have to kind of correct it every single shot because the length of pull is a little short for me. So maybe it's breaking my grip every trigger pull. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Me and my cameraman Connor both noticed that this gun felt a little bit snappier. It wasn't noticeable enough that I wouldn't buy this handgun by any stretch of the imagination. Something that was noteworthy, so we wanted to throw that in there. On here, you're gonna have the exact same rail as the 43X MOS, so we just put a Streamlight TLR7 sub with the Glock rail attachment. No complaints there. I'm glad it has that segment. It's one of the reasons why I did not buy the 43 was because it had no rail. That's why I think the Glock 43X MOS is one of the better options, is you have more capability. Adding a weapon light is pretty important for a lot of people, so I think it's cool that Glock added that, and it's nice that PSA added this as well. One thing to keep in mind with the Micro Dagger is the mag release is a lot better than the standard Dagger compact or Dagger full size. This is gonna be a lot more positive. It's actually going to eject the mag. The Dagger, you kind of have to flip it out to get it to fall all the way out. Even with the mag extension, it's kind of slow to release, whereas the Micro Dagger, it's a little more positive. The Glock 43X with the Shield Arms mags is a lot more positive than the Micro Dagger. You can see it springs out of there. Even with the OEM 10 round mags from Glock, it's still a lot more positive than the Micro Dagger. That is another complaint I have with the 43X, MOS, 43, 43X, all of them, is 10 rounds is pretty bad. I don't know why Glock did not do something innovative and squeeze 15 in like Shield Arms did or PSA did. There is a little bit of drama between Shield and PSA right now with their mags. I'm gonna stay out of it. However, I think Shield did a very good job innovating, creating this 15 round mag for the 43X. We've shot quite a few rounds to these now and I like them a lot. The only thing to keep in mind is you will need to replace your mag release at some point. It will get chewed up by the metal mag catch. I'm actually curious to see how many rounds it takes. So I still have my plastic one in there. I want to see how long it takes to get chewed up, and then I'll just switch over to the steel one. But that is something to keep in mind. If you upgrade to the 15 round steel mag, is you're gonna need to change out your mag release. Whereas the Micro Dagger has plastic on the front, so that you do not need to change out the plastic mag release on the Dagger. It'll not wear it out, it'll be just fine, which is something kind of nice that PSA did, is that this is plastic and it's not going to wear out. And that is something else you want to keep in mind when you're buying a 43X if you choose it over the Micro Dagger, is I would definitely spend the money and get a shield mag to upgrade the capacity. It's gonna be more money up front, so you're gonna be looking at more like $190 difference, but it's gonna be a huge upgrade. So now you're looking at $60 more for a mag release and a mag from Shield Arms to get where the Micro Dagger is. PSA only ships with one mag, so keep that in mind. So to get the Glock 43X on the same level of mag capacity with the Micro Dagger, you're gonna be spending a little bit more money. As for holster options for the Micro Dagger, everything we found says that this will fit a 43X holster. Obviously, light bearing versus non-light bearing is gonna make a big difference. The things we've seen is a 43X light bearing holster will fit this. So if you guys are gonna look at the Micro Dagger, I would do your own research. See if the holster company has a disclaimer saying that the Micro Dagger will fit a 43X holster. With the Micro Dagger basically being a clone of the 43X, aftermarket support is going to be there. Obviously, there's a lot of aftermarket support for the 43X. Gonna be no difference for the Micro Dagger. The only thing to keep in mind is compensators. This is our Herrington Arms HD43 compensator, and it has Gen 5 fins on the front of it, which will not work with the Micro Dagger. We make a no fin option that works. We've tested it a little bit at the range today. We have a True Precision Glock 43X threaded barrel. It ran great as well. So keep that in mind, is the slide profile is going to be different on the Micro Dagger. However, any internal operating feature will work. So if you throw in a Glock 43X trigger in this, it's gonna work just fine. It's the same internals. But you gotta keep in mind that slide profile is different if you want a form-fitting compensator. I will say I do like the cuts more on the Micro Dagger. The slide is a little bit nicer. Moving on through aftermarket accessories, you can put obviously any subcompact weapon light on there that takes the Glock 43X rail attachment. We have tested the shield mags in the Micro Dagger, and it works fine. If you're gonna run the shield mags, you're gonna wanna swap out for that mag release. Again, we didn't do that yet. We kind of want to see how long it'll last. I would recommend doing that if you want longevity and reliability. One thing that's kind of cool is PSA went ahead and released this C1 slide, which is going to have porting in here like the X Macro. We actually found that this does a pretty good job at reducing recoil. A lot better job than the X Macro does at reducing recoil. It actually performed just as good as a compensator, maybe a little bit more, which was incredibly surprising. And it kind of pushed me to want to do a dual port for the Micro Dagger compensator I'm designing right now. I think we'll still have the 43 option available for you guys. We only have about 200 rounds through this handgun. Not as many of those rounds were through this slide. We had pretty good reliability. I think this is kind of a cool option from factory to have this slide that you can just pull on and off. It's relatively inexpensive for the slide, so if you want to switch it between this slide and this slide, you can pretty easily. The only thing I will say is it does add quite a bit of weight. This is a solid inch of steel off the end of the handgun. And I really don't like seeing the slide hang out past the rail. To me, it's just kind of like an ugly look. But this is a pretty effective ported slide, so keep that in mind if you are interested in this specific style. One thing I did notice about the Micro Dagger and the Glock 43X magwells is there is a pretty stark difference between them. Everything else on the gun is pretty similar, except there are angular cuts on the Glock 43X on the sides, and there are no cuts on the PSA Micro Dagger. So reloads might be a little bit easier on the 43X than the Micro Dagger. However, they both perform fine at the range. I did not notice one was harder to reload than the other. My biggest con about the Micro Dagger will be the trigger. I do not like this break action style trigger, and it also has a rolling break. When you pull the trigger, typically you hit a wall, which you hit a little bit of one here, but when you start pulling the trigger, it starts inching forward, whereas where the 43X, when you hit that wall and you start pulling, it just breaks. I prefer the Glock 43X trigger a lot more than I do the Micro Dagger. Both the hinge style and the trigger break, it's just not ideal. And something else I noticed is when I pull the trigger on the Micro Dagger, I don't know if it's the shoe of the trigger or what, but my finger wants to kind of slide off and roll inward. It's much more noticeable when I'm full presentation. You can see my finger wants to like slide off. I haven't really noticed this in too many other handguns or triggers. The Glock 43X, it doesn't do that for me. It stays planted right where it's supposed to. I will definitely be putting an aftermarket trigger in this handgun, and it's gonna eat most of the cost with those $136 in savings. That's pretty much gonna go right into a trigger. However, I still think this is a pretty good buy as the ergonomics are a little bit better, and it comes with the 15 round mag right off the get. So don't let that discourage you if you are looking at the Micro Dagger. It's pretty easy to replace the trigger, and that's not gonna be the same for everybody. Just because I say it doesn't work for me, doesn't mean it won't work for you. So which one should you guys buy? The 43X MOS or the PSA Micro Dagger? It's honestly up to you. The trigger is gonna be a little bit better in the 43X. You're gonna spend more money, and you're gonna have to ultimately buy a different magazine to get it up to par with the Micro Dagger, but the Micro Dagger trigger is pretty bad and doesn't necessarily have the name to back it or the reliability testing that the 43X has been through. Ultimately, I think I'm gonna choose the 43X MOS. I feel comfortable knowing that this gun has hundreds of thousands of rounds of testing through it. It's had no issues. I have no problem buying the Shield mag, and I like that our 43X fin decompensator fits it. To me, honestly, it's almost a wash. I like both handguns, but if I had to choose one, I'm gonna choose the 43X, simply because I know that the testing has been done, and simply it comes down that the 43X is more proven of a platform. Yes, this is based off of it, but this actually has been through all the testing. Ultimately, both are great handguns. Drop a comment down below which one you guys are gonna choose. If you guys learned something, we'd appreciate a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.